President Donald Trump has said he wants the United States to take control of Gaza after permanently resettling displaced Palestinians outside the war-torn region. The president added that he wouldn't rule out deploying US troops to support Gaza's reconstruction.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Trump's comments came as he welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for talks at the White House, the first foreign leader to visit the US president in his second term. Their meeting comes amid discussions of a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and a temporary truce deal for Gaza's reconstruction, something that Trump and his advisors have claimed is not viable. But Egypt and Jordan, as well as other Arab nations, have rejected calls by Trump to relocate the territory's 2.3 million Palestinians. And although hardline right-wing members of Netanyahu's government have embraced Trump's comments, the Israeli Prime Minister is also facing pressure to end the temporary truce and continue with the war. Meanwhile, protesters and families of Israeli hostages in Gaza marched to the US Embassy in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, calling on President Trump to reach an agreement to release all the remaining hostages. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called Tuesday's mass shooting at a school in Örebro the worst in his country's history. Speaking at a joint news conference with Justice Minister Gunnar Strömmer, Kristersson said a darkness is being cast over Sweden.
Vi har idag sett ett brutalt dödligt våld mot helt oskyldiga människor. Det här är den värsta massskjutningen i svensk historia. Ännu saknas väldigt många svar. Och jag kan inte ge de svaren heller.
The gunman is reported to have opened fire at the campus Risberska school in Örebro at around 12:30 p.m. after many students had gone home following a national exam. Swedish police say about 10 people, including the gunman, were killed, but they have not yet provided a definitive number of how many were wounded. Authorities have said there are no suspected connections to terrorism at this point, adding there were also no warning signs before the attack.
Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss Syria's economic recovery. They also spoke about the presence of Kurdish-led forces in the north of the country, which Turkey considers to be a security threat. The interim president was welcomed by the Turkish president and a small group of the honor guard at the entrance of the presidential palace. It was a low-key ceremony compared to visits of other heads of state, who are usually received with military bands and troops escorting them. Al-Shara, who was appointed last week, was the former rebel leader who led the insurgents who toppled President Bashar al-Assad in December. Turkey, who was a strong backer of groups opposed to al-Assad during the 13-year civil war, is considered to be one of the new administration's key allies. Erdogan's office said talks would focus on steps towards Syria's economic recovery and its security and stability.
A Syrian family wants to hold Frontex accountable for human rights violations and illegal pushback. Back in 2016, the family arrived in Greece, where their asylum application was registered. However, just 11 days later, Frontex and Greek authorities forcibly placed them on a flight to Turkey without processing their asylum request or issuing a return decision. On Tuesday, the case arrived at the Grand Chamber of the EU Court of Justice in Luxembourg.
This case is important because it's the first case in which the court is going to answer the question whether Frontex can be held liable for fundamental rights violations at the EU external borders. And the court showed that it realizes the importance of the case by referring the case to the Grand Chamber. And this means that Normally, the court hears a case before a formation of 3 or 5 judges, but if it refers the case to the Grand Chamber, that means that 15 judges will hear the case. And it shows that the court acknowledges the importance of the question before it.
The case has both legal and social significance because it has the potential to set a crucial legal precedent. The court will determine the responsibility of Frontex to uphold human rights before, during, and after border operations. Euronews contacted Frontex's spokesperson for a reaction. While he did not want to talk about the details of the case as it is still ongoing, but insisted that the responsibility lies with the member states. The decision is expected at the end of the year.
The Association for Consumer Protection, Efektiva, called on consumers in Serbia to boycott 5 major retail chains due to their excessive pricing. The association says it is normal for prices to increase because of inflation, but not as much as it is reflected on the price tags. Serbia is the latest to join the boycott, a trend that started in Croatia and quickly caught on in other Western Balkan countries.
Pa ja ne znam da li je bojkot prodavnice, ja pošla onako.
Aha. A jel mislite da su visoke cene?
Mislim.
Za koje proizvode posebno?
Pa uglavnom gde idem po akcijama za prehranu.
Morala sam da dođem do prodavnice, a inače, mislim, ne znam, nisam baš u političkim vodama.
Ok, jel mislite da su cene visoke u prodavnici?
Pa sve je poskupelo, to je činjenica.
A professor that spoke with Euronews said the success of a boycott depends on several factors: the duration of a boycott, the level of collective consumer action, and how the retail chains respond to the boycott. He also reminded that Serbia had already recognized the fact that prices need to be regulated.
Već neko vreme unazad stručnjaci apeluju da se analizira celokupan lanac i da se vidi gde je u tom lancu tačno dodat taj višak vrednosti, odnosno gde je došlo do porasta cene koja uzrokuje to da finalni potrošači očigledno znatno više plaćaju određene kategorije artikala kod nas nego što je to slučaj u nekim zapadnoevropskim zemljama.
Experts said the path to lower prices depends on the government. Only they can introduce subsidies on basic food items, facilitate the entry of new sellers into the market, and reduce dependence on imports by encouraging domestic production.
Proizvođači i trgovinski lanci, sada nije samo na trgovinskim lancima krivica, vide da prosto imaju tu moć da ovde diktiraju visoke cene i da su naši potrošači spremni da ih plate, dok na nekim drugim tržištima nisu spremni da ih plate i tamo moraju da idu sa nižim maržama i to i rade. Naravno, ukoliko se ovde pokaže da i ovde potrošači su spremni da kazne takvo ponašanje, onda će i oni promeniti to i spustiti cene.
Consumers in Croatia were the first in the region to participate in the boycott, which proved extremely effective. The initiative was launched by Croatian consumer rights group Halo Inspector. A report by the Croatian Tax Administration showed that the boycott resulted in sales dropping by 53% compared to the week before. An advisor to Halo Inspector told local media he hopes the boycott sends a clear message and leads to the creation of a mechanism that regulates and monitors the market.
This Belgian photovoltaic park is an illustration of the European energy transition. In the background, the Huisten-Zolder coal mine has been the last to close its doors in the Benelux. Today, approximately 25,000 solar panels cover the former mine waste landfill.
After the mine closing in 1992, this landfill wasn't used anymore, and we together, Group Machils and LRM, they developed together a solar park, big solar park on this site that gives a new destination to not used land anymore. So it's a 5 megawatt plant built in 2008, and it gives 5 gigawatt-hour green electricity production a year.
For the first time, solar has surpassed coal in the European electricity mix in 2024. Nuclear remains the largest source of electricity production, followed by wind, gas, and hydro. In 2024, 11% of EU's electricity was produced from solar and 10% from coal. Solar is on the rise in all European countries, with Hungary leading the way, where a quarter of electricity is produced from solar energy. Greece and Spain are next.
It is a milestone, not just for the energy transition, where renewables are pushing fossils to the margin, more and more so, but also a milestone for European security, because it's homegrown electricity, and for European competitiveness, because it's the most affordable energy.
However, there is a cloud on the horizon. The European market is flooded with Chinese solar panels, largely subsidized by Beijing.
90% of the panels today are coming from one single source, and that is China. We have been engaging over the last years together with the European Commission in bringing back manufacturing to Europe. It is important that Europe is resilient and diversifies supplies, producing again in Europe, but also diversifying more generally.
Another challenge is to improve storage capacity and electrical flexibility to make the most of this intermittent energy. The target is set. The EU aims to have 42.5% of renewable energy sources in its final energy consumption by 2030. Its goal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050.